Good afternoon and welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Well, last week we talked about anti-Semitism, and it was actually turned out to be a pretty timely conversation, because right after that conversation and the horrible act in Israel occurred, a horrible act of anti-Semitism and worse, two Palestinian terrorists go into a house of worship, into a synagogue, and kill, brutally murder with knives and pickaxes, whatever they are, four rabbis that were praying and a police officer.
Yeah, by the way, meat cleavers.
Meat cleavers, right.
And where did the guy get the meat cleaver from? He works down the street. And he just took it from the store that he works in down the street.
Right. So obviously, horrific, these acts of anti-Semitism, to say the least, on obviously, and what you and I talked about, on very righteous people. These were rabbis, most of them. And it's kind of surprising, and you mentioned to me, and this is what kind of surprised me a little bit, that anti-Semitism happens to the righteous, and that's even part of God's plan. And that just got me really thinking a little bit. That's a tough one to swallow. Tough. Especially when you think about that. If anti-Semitism on the righteous is part of God's plan, then you might even have to say, well, then the perpetrators of anti-Semitism, is that on the righteous? Is that also part of God's plan? And that's where it gets a little confusing, because
obviously
we've all dealt with anti-Semitism, and I'm not talking about, even when I say this, when I was a kid, you got a little Jim Bob, who nicknamed me JB in the 6th grade, Jew boy. That's what I was called in the 6th grade, and things like that. I even had a guy, I was thinking of some good anti-Semitism, but I'm not even talking about this either. I had a guy just a couple years ago came in looking for money to start a business. He came in, he heard about it, he came to my office to talk to me a little about it, and he said, I'm going to start this great idea, and I don't have any money. I'm not like you guys, have that great Uncle Goldberg that goes out and hands out money every time you need it. Needless to say, by the way, I didn't invest with this guy. But I'm not even talking about those. But what about them? And you and I have talked about it before. The global anti-Semitism, like what this happened the other day.
I'm still laughing at that because the guy obviously thought it's such an accepted fact.
No, he didn't own it.
Of course, why would you take offense to that? It's a fact.
Oh no, he wasn't joking. See, he thought I would take some of that Uncle Goldberg money that I had stored up and maybe give it to him.
Right.
Which made sense. But
right now there are people laughing at us, laughing at that.
Right. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right.
But I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the things that have global significance. We've got situations right now, and I'm wondering, are these people? Is God controlling these people when it has global significance? Right now, after this horrific act we just discussed, the President of the United States comes on and gives a talk and says that there needs to be we need to stop the killing of Palestinians and Israelis, and both sides need to take a step back. Comparing a moral equivalency of these brutal murderers to Jews and rabbis that are sitting in there in Israel. The President of the United States gives a speech back in the Rose Garden and a while back, and where with members of the Muslim Brotherhood in the U.S. sitting in the front row, demanding that the Jews go back to the 1967 borders. Now, this is the President of the United States. Obviously, he's not dumb. He can read a map. He knows what would happen if the Jews went back to the 1967 borders. So I'm saying, is this like Pharaoh here? Is his heart being hardened?
Maybe he really believes so much in the Jews. He says, we could even put him back to the 67 border. They'll pull it off somehow.
Well, his belief must be so strong that he even thinks if he doesn't do anything about Iran with a nuclear, in fact, he wants to make a deal with Iran, which would obviously everybody knows wouldn't stop them from getting a nuclear weapon. In fact, would probably precipitate them getting a nuclear weapon, which they've already vowed they would use and any means possible to kill the 6 million Jews in Israel. So we say, I wonder then, since this has such a global significance, is God pulling the strings? God's always pulling the strings, but we talk about Pharaoh. Why would Pharaoh keep hardening his heart? He saw all these plagues happening. Is the President of the United States, is his heart being hardened, or things like that happening right now?
So I have to tell you a conversation I had. Some rabbis, and we were talking about the situation, what happened in Israel, how do we react to it, how do we guide our congregations in reaction to it, what's the situation, how are we going to deal with it. And it's very interesting. At one point they said, stop and listen to this conversation, because we were all talking about what do we do within our congregations, within our lives, they'll change the situation. No one ever mentioned for 1 second the Arabs. In other words, there was one factor that was irrelevant to the problem, and that's the Arabs. I said there can be no greater dismissal because we don't really believe that they had too much to do with it.
Okay.
This would be like, the guy goes out and gets like pounced upon by a wild animal. Well, no one really blames the wild animal because the wild animal is just doing what wild animals do. You say, why didn't the guy take precautions? What can he do to avoid it next time? But we don't really blame the wild animal all that much. And that's the way it is. That's the way we're looking at this whole thing. We're looking at it as though there's a chess game being played. Except the two parties are not the Arabs and the Jews. The two players are God and the Jews. And the Arabs aren't even in the game.
Wow.
They're not even in the game.
Or are they one of the pawns, or they're not even in the pawns?
They're not. They are the issue. They're playing. We're playing out what they're going to do. The result of the game will determine what they're going to do. But it's not like we need to do this for them or don't do this for them or that. I think everyone has pretty much realized that short of annihilating all of them, this is pretty much an impossible situation, and it's not going to be dealt with. By dealing with the Arabs, not going to deal with this situation.
Right.
But people are saying we're dealing with God. So there's really, we have to give the micro, but the macro. First of all, we have to take a moment to take the big picture look at this, and then the micro look at it. So everyone has to know that from a Torah perspective, God has a big plan. And this is the plan which carries with it the entire scope of the history of mankind, from the beginning, which is Adam, until the end, which is the ultimate resurrection of the dead and the world living like in a godly way.
Right.
And the whole scope in between, God is moving forward towards his goal. And to get to his goal, he's got a lot of moving pieces, and he moves them around. First, he has 4 empires that dominate the world. That's been a lot of Jewish history: Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. And then after that, there's going to be a period of time where the Arabs, or perhaps the Persians, according to one version in the Talmud, will take over the world. And we're going to have to live through that also.
That would be tough.
And, if we're not living through it already, and live through that, and then after that, then the world's going to be brought into a godly place. Now, why does it have to be like that? Because each of them represents another alternative to a God-centric world, and each of them represents a particular challenge, and each of them represents a particular challenge to the existence of the Jewish people, and the Jewish people have to overcome it, outlive it. Now, in that, you and I don't have a lot to do with it. Maybe a little bit. We each play our part as part of the overall Jewish picture. But that's a real big macro scene, and God is manipulating the pieces, and everyone is playing out their part in it. It's just good to know that that's what's going on. Now, while that big play is being played out, there still is you and I and the families and the guys that were massacred in Har Nof, and their families and their friends and everyone all along the way.
Right.
Okay. The idea there is that, first of all, everybody who is living is working out their life vis-a-vis God. I want to be good with God. You want to be good with God. And God, while he's playing out this big scheme, also plays into individual lives. How does this big scheme impact? Why did it hit that person and it didn't hurt that person, or it hit that person to the extent that it did and it hit the other person to the extent that it did? How is that? Now, in that case, interestingly enough, the people that are most affected by that are the people who will most be receptive to the message.
Okay, that's where it's getting tough here now. That is
where it gets tough.
That's tough.
Now, and even though even though they might not be the people that are the ones that maybe if people are not doing right, they are bringing a punishment on Israel, it doesn't necessarily mean that the punishment will be played out on the people who did the crimes.
Right.
Punishment could be played out on people who didn't do the crimes, and greater people and their suffering and the loss of them is a great blow to all of Israel. So when holy people like this die, it's a big loss. Now this is an idea which I really believe has been at the root of a lot of Christian thought. Matter of fact, I think this idea is really behind the whole Jesus idea.
Really, that makes sense.
Suffering
right.
servant and all that. You know,
He takes it for everybody.
Right. We do believe, and this is found in the Talmud, that tzaddik, the righteous person, suffers, and their suffering is a suffering that in an entire generation really is, they absorb a suffering because they will most get the message. They are perhaps the people that are most whole and most complete. They are perhaps the people that are most ready to move on from this world because their lives have really been completed.
Well, but the real message is really not, I guess, going to them. It's to their families and the people and the rest of Israel. Do they represent, I guess, to these people the most righteous so that they maybe get the message better? I don't know.
So when particularly righteous people suffer like that, it has the greatest impact. If a bunch of lowlifes were to suffer, let's say people are doing bad, so God goes in and he has them like gun down a bunch of homeless people,
right,
or a bunch of criminal types.
Right.
You know, someone breaks into a crack house and shoots up a whole bunch of people. Some Arabs break in to a crack house, and they shoot a bunch of people, and there are crack houses in Israel. So they break into an Israeli crack house and they shoot and they chop up a bunch of people. And what's everyone going to say?
They might have deserved it. It might have been, whatever.
He's like, phew, what a mess. That's really bad. That's crazy. Don't go to crack houses.
Right.
I mean, we'd have 1,000,001 excuses. When they go in, and men are wrapped up in their tallis and wearing their tefillin, and they're in the middle of prayer, and they get shut down, everyone goes, whoa, what was that all about? I got to make some sense of that.
Well, no doubt, but sometimes the sense that people make, and I've actually seen this in my personal life as well with people, sometimes the sense they make when good people suffer is, what's God doing here? I mean, not, hey, let's see what's God doing. Maybe there's not a God. Maybe God doesn't care. Maybe God is just up here watching and, oops, another righteous guy got killed.
Right, so I'll tell you, there's, you can find this, there is a audio. It's a YouTube, but it's a picture and then audio. Right. You can find this at the OU.org, and NCSY probably also has a .org. They have websites up, and there's a fellow who, for many, many years, was a director of a branch of NCSY, which is a synagogue youth movement in America. He was the Long Island division head or something like that, and region head. And he's since moved to Israel. He spoke. He was in the synagogue. He survived unscathed. And he spoke to a yeshiva.
All right.
And he addressed the students. He spoke for about 20 minutes. I listened to it. So he made a really strange point at first. He says, I want you to know this is a minyan that we go to Sunday through Friday. All of us regulars at this minyan. It's a group of about 25 guys. They all meet. They all pray. The minyan, it's a special minyan. It's designed to be over at 7:15. The starting time changes. We want to because depending on sometimes prayers are long or short, but it always ends at the same time every day. We all know each other. We're all a bunch of regulars. We're all there every day. So he says, let me describe the room to you. And he goes into this long description of the room. And basically the bottom line is there's a right side of the room and there's a left side of the room. And he said, when these terrorists came into the room, they started shooting at the right side of the room because the way he described the layout of the room, the left side of the room was sort of sheltered from them and it just wasn't smooth for them.
Right.
So he said all the people on the left side of the room were all spared. Everything was okay, and they all managed to get out. But it was all the people on the right side of the room is where all the casualties were. he said, in this minyan, everybody sits in the same seat every day. Everyone can sit in the same seat every day. Everyone comes, they all have their regular, everyone comes at certain times, and, everyone knows everyone, and that's the way regular daily minyans work. He said, I sit on the right side of the synagogue. I have sat on the right side of the synagogue for 11 years. Every day, I sit on the right side of the synagogue. If I come in and someone's sitting in the seat I usually sit in, I sit somewhere nearby, but I always sit on the right side of the synagogue. I have never, ever, ever, in 11 years, Sunday through Friday, praying in that synagogue, ever sat on the left side of the synagogue. On Tuesday morning, I sat on the left side of the synagogue. And do you know why? I don't know.
Wow.
He said, I did. I don't know why in the world.
First time in 11 years.
First time in 11 years, Sunday through Friday, every day, I always pray, same minyan, been there going there for 11 years.
Wow.
Don't know why. Sat on the left side.
No,
Always sit on the right side of the room, sat on the left side of the room. Don't know why. And he proceeded to tell of a number of other people that every day, they never come, they never miss. One time, like the guy's cab didn't come, and he told a bunch of stories. One guy had unusually just stepped out of the room for a moment, and he was coming back, and it was a whole sequence of events that had led him to just happened to have walked out of the room at that moment when these guys burst in.
Wow.
So it is clear that you might not like it, and the results are horrifying to us and sickening to us, but it's almost impossible to say that it is randomness.
Right.
It's almost impossible to say that there isn't a guiding hand that is above and beyond those two slime that just picked up. And to tell you the truth, I don't even know if they're slime, because when a guy is in the falls into the lion cage and the lion eats him.
Right.
Okay, he's just a lion. I mean, lions do this type of stuff. So I don't even know if these guys are slime. I don't even know what they are. They're just like animals, and they've been told that this is what they need to do, so that's what they go out and do.
Or, I don't want to get off the point, but just briefly, or is it just as obvious on the side of the perpetrator of what's going on in this world as it is on the victims? Are they being, I don't want to say manipulated, but almost, is it the fact that they came in at the exact same time? They were supposed to do this. They were supposed to grab the meat cleavers from the thing. Just like the President of the United States was supposed to have these negotiations with Iran and is supposed to do these things. I'm not taking away the blame or the fault, but is God manipulating the whole situation?
I believe that God is definitely manipulating to the, now that doesn't release the individuals from culpability. Even when the guy falls into the lion cage and the lion eats him, they kill the lion.
Yep.
And these guys are killed. The same guy said that at a certain point they were done shooting because their bullets were out, their guns were out of bullets. So he said he and another friend, another guy there, they picked up their axes, their meat cleavers, and they started hacking at people. So he and the other guy picked up tables, and they were defending themselves with tables.
Right.
So they were hacking at the tables, but they couldn't, break through the tables. So the two terrorists realized that it's a standoff because the two guys are still in the room. They've got tables, and the other guys, and they didn't have bullets. So he said he put down the table, and he looked at the guy, and he stared him right in the eye. And they stared back and forth at each other because there was just this standoff.
Right.
And they didn't know what to do. And he said the interesting thing is he did not see hatred in the guy's eye. He said the guy was just sort of like,
that's what I'm supposed to
stay
do.
at work. He's just going to work.
Wow.
I'm doing my job. When the guy puts out a trap, and catches the rat in the house.
Right.
And he just, it wasn't like he wouldn't have hatred. He said that guy saw hatred in his eye because he hated him. And the Israeli wanted to kill that Arab. But he said the Arab didn't have hatred. He was just killing. As though this is what I got to do.
Wow.
This is what I got to do. And I'm going to be dead in a few minutes anyway. So I'm just doing what I got to do. business as usual. This is what they told me. This is what I got to do. I'll be in heaven soon or wherever it is going to be, and that's it. So the fact that we can't get into their head too much, trying to talk sense into them, try to approach them, or talk about their situation or their circumstances.
Right.
Both of these guys are employed. We're employed people. Families, automobiles, the whole bit.
Right.
They're doing okay. So what's going on? So we tend to look at it ourselves. And I believe that the whole thing was so bizarre and so startling that it clearly is a message. Now, to get into that message, why, what's been happening in Israel, what particulars is going down, I don't want to start to do that. I think everyone could do that on their own. I'm not going to sit here and say it's because people are doing X or people are doing Y or Z, and I'm not going to go down that road. But I do think that everyone, when you see this, says to himself, I got to do something with me, with my life, to make myself better, closer, and to improve myself in such a way that that things like this, these messages can't just go by without being noticed.
It's an amazing point and an amazing story you told about the guy that was there. About it. It's a very tough argument because then you can take this situation to so many other things. I mean, you can bring it back to the Holocaust. You can bring it to the different things. And I agree that there is a message in the Holocaust somewhere, but that's the macro. The micro is 6 million people died.
Right.
The micro here is 5 people died and 2
Right.
terrorists, because I'm not going to include them in the same
Right.
thing. So it's like that's a tough argument you have there. It's a tough thing to try to bring up.
Absolutely it is the Holocaust. This is just a micro Holocaust.
Yep.
Right?
Well,
and as a matter of fact, for many people, the visions, the images were very Holocaust-ish. Startlingly reminiscent of Holocaust. The carnage and Jews wrapped up in their children. And, there were situations where, and I just happened to read a story recently, where when the Nazis came into a particular town, they marched all the people in the town out with the rabbi at the head. They were marching out. They told the rabbi, no, go get a Torah. Because they were going to march them off to kill them all. They wanted the rabbi to die holding a Torah. Because they wanted to, fill the picture. So it should look just right. We're going to kill the rabbi holding the Torah. I'm sure for his point and for his money, that rabbi said, well, good. I'd like to die holding the Torah.
Right.
So, we're in agreement. We're in agreement, You are killing me because of what I am, and I'm a guy that wears the tallis, and he wears the tefillin, and he prays to God. And you're killing me because I'm that. So I understand that you hate that. You understand that, you hate that. Great, we're in agreement. We see eye to eye on this.
It's interesting. It brings up so many different points. And still, for me, I get stuck on the point of if this is in the whole plan and scheme of things, does that give a little bit of is the Nazi that marched them down the road, does he get a little bit of a pass? Not a full pass, but does he get a little bit of a pass?
Question was asked already about Pharaoh.
Because it's the same question.
It's a Pharaoh story. It's a Pharaoh story. It's been dealt with extensively at Pharaoh. Nachmanides dealt with this question at length. And he says, can't Pharaoh say, listen, it's all part of God's plan. I'm just a faithful soldier. Someone had to oppress them.
But not just that. It's clear in the Torah. He hardened Pharaoh's heart. God hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
So he hardened his Nazi's heart.
Right. So at a certain point, that Pharaoh loses his free will. And why does he lose his free will? Because he didn't exercise his free will. In other words, he made a bad choice. Pharaoh did not have to be the one, says Nachmanides, to volunteer to kill the Jews. Although God had already told Abraham, your children will be slaves in a strange land, and they will be in servitude, and I'm going to take them out afterwards. Pharaoh didn't have to step up and volunteer to be the bad guy.
Right, I guess that's true.
There was a part that called in the play. They were casting for a bad guy.
I want to be a bad guy.
You don't have to volunteer to play the bad guy. You don't have to do that.
Interesting.
Let God find himself his own bad guy. You don't have to volunteer. That's
Sort of the same thing that Mordecai said to Esther. I guess you don't have to be the good guy here.
Right, that's right.
No matter what, the Jews are going to get saved. You can move on.
God, this play is being cast, and all the roles will be filled. You want to be the one? If you step up to be the one, you take responsibility. So if it's the bad guy, Pharaoh, that's A. B is, when Pharaoh did it, if Pharaoh did it, so listen, I'm just playing my part. I'm just doing what I have to do. As soon as there is a moment of lust or personal hatred in it,
Right.
then Pharaoh's taken all the responsibility on himself because he went way beyond just playing the part.
Right.
So these guys, I don't know if they were just playing their part or not, or they went beyond it or not. I'm not giving them a free pass. I'm not giving any of them a free pass. I'm certainly not giving all the people that incite them and the imams that tell them to go out and do this stuff, who are really just the same as all those priests that would incite the rabble to go out and do the pogroms.
Pogroms, right.
It's the same deal.
But if you go that way, and that's why I started off my discussion with, how far do you go up and blame? Are the people, the heads of states, the President of the United States, the people that facilitate this in some way, are they all playing a role here? I mean, even though they have free will, they have free choice, are they all playing a role? That role had to be played.
The guy that's playing the biggest role in all of this, the biggest puppet in all of this is the President of the United States, I believe. And then there's a bunch of other pretty big puppets too. But there is a verse that says, the hearts of officers and kings is in the hand of God. There are certain people like you and me that maybe when we have our walk-on part in the play,
right,
and they actually even let us ad-lib a little bit because all we're supposed to say is your car is waiting for you. So we walk on, and if we say the car is waiting for you, your car is here. They let us.
It's like that line in Seinfeld when he got to go. These pretzels were making me thirsty. I don't know if you saw that when he got to tell the line. He was in a line in the movie. Kramer was in a line. He got it wrong, but anyway, different story.
So if it's a small little part, they let you ad lib.
Right.
But when you're the main character, you have to stick to script. And what happens is when someone becomes like the president or president of the United States in this case, who's a big player in all this, so he is totally on script. And he is not allowed any ad-libbing, and it's totally taken over. He loses free will, just like Pharaoh did. At a certain point, God steps in and he says, forget it, like, this part is too important to the play. You are just going to be playing this out the way I am saying.
So now, I now have my excuse for all those thousands of Jews, 70% of the Jews that elected him as president. Now I understand why they did it.
Yeah.
Now I feel better about that now.
And this is really true. It says, because the hearts, if we want to make it go in our way, we got to try to do what we can do to be the best that we can be, and then that'll send the message to the producer of the play and the director,
right.
And they will tell some of their big actors to start acting the way they want.
That answers a lot of questions for me. It really does, because that's where I was stuck. And it's interesting. I mean, obviously, it's a horrible situation, but there obviously is something, especially from the story that you told, there obviously is something that we're supposed to glean from this, and it couldn't be more obvious, especially how you told that, that this is not just a random act of violence.
Right.
This is
the guy says, the first thing he says at the beginning of the talk, he says, I am not traumatized. I'm not traumatized. He says, I slept well last night.
Wow.
He said, I'm heartbroken because my friends have been murdered. I'm heartbroken, but I am not traumatized. So then when they had questions and answers at the end, one guy says, why do you make such a big point of saying you're not traumatized? So he says, because I understand that all of this is in God's hand.
Wow.
And let's be perfectly clear about it. I don't know why I was on the left side. Clearly God picked me up and he put me on the left side. Period. So he said, once you realize that, so then
nothing you can
obviously God put him there and put me there, and tomorrow maybe he'll put me there and him there. No sense being traumatized about that. It's just the way it is.
Wow. Very insightful. I got to give you credit. When I learned a lot, I learned a lot today. And I'm very...
No, and when the guy said that, I'm like, whoa.
I'm gonna go look. I'll listen to that.
Yeah.
Show. That's very interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it speaks for about 20 minutes.
Well, This is a good one. This one, pass on to your friends. This is a good one. I like it. I'm impressed. And it's, because it is a question that we all ask. Obviously, everybody asks the question about the Holocaust. We ask the question about life. Why did this person get sick? Why did that person get sick? This is an interesting answer right here.
And it is. It's all that, those big questions, everything that we're talking about now is the same. That's why the Holocaust happened, and it's all the same thing.
Wow. Interesting. All right, well, hopefully we'll be back next week with better news, better stories, things that aren't as upsetting, but that's
some good news.
That's in God's hands.
That's right.
See you next week.